Welcome to this work-life workshop on gentle parenting here at the University of Kentucky. This workshop is offered to our employees here at the university to assist them on their parenting journey. And so today we're talking about gentle parenting, and our speaker is Emily Bollinger, and she is with our UK Healthcare and Children's hospital program. And so she'll tell you a little bit more about herself. But thank you so much, Emily, for being here and offering this topic for us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for spending your lunch hour talking about this. So I am a clinical child life specialist here at the Children's Hospital. I'm also the clinical instructor for the Child Life program through Human Development and Family Sciences. So my work life is spent supporting kids and families through medical experiences and teaching college students about a lot of topics related to kids and families and how we support our kids. So this is a topic that has come up for me professionally at different times. That's also one that matters to me personally. I am mom to two kids that have incredibly different personalities, support needs, approaches to life. And so my parenting has really needed to adapt to meet these two wildly different kids. So we're going to talk through kind of some of the concepts of gentle parenting today. I'm going to start asking you all a few questions and just kind of think about what this is, what it looks like, and hopefully share a few strategies that you could consider if this is a parenting style that you feel like would be a good support for your child and that would feel good to you as a parent. So the first few questions I have, if you can just put responses into the chat, we'll kind of read those and have a little bit of conversation as far as kind of what we're thinking about and talking with this. So the first one is, what would you say makes someone a good parent? There are a lot of good responses. Thank you. And related to that, and you can continue to answer that one if you want to as well. What characteristics do you want your child to have now? How do you want your child to be described? What do you want kind of their character to be? This is great. I'm seeing a lot about kindness, uh, being confident, respectful, honest, kind of good people. And then the next question is, what kind of person do you want your child to become? This might be the same as your previous answer, or it might be different. If you're the parent of an infant or a toddler right now, then what you want right now might be different from the adult you hope that they become. Or it might be the same thing and just kind of manifested differently. These are great. I'm seeing a lot about empathy, about caring about people behind them, about being self-sufficient and resilient, and all of these things that we want. So the reasons that I want to start asking these questions, and you can continue to work through this, is a lot of parenting approaches and a lot of parenting strategies that you see are very behavior based. It's, what do I want my child to do? Or what do I want my child to not do? Right. So it's behavioral, good choices, bad choices, this or that, and is more of kind of a training system to get the desired output that you want from them. When we talk about gentle parenting, it's not so much what do I want my child to do, it's who do I want my child to be. And that's a really different mindset to have when you're tackling a frustrating behavior or whatever it is, but shifting into who do I want them to be and who do I want to be as a parent is really what drives this approach to parenting. And it's something that makes it distinctly different from a lot of other parenting strategies that you might be familiar with or have experienced in your own life, either as a child or as a parent. So, a few of the key characteristics of gentle parenting and what we're talking about is that it's responsive. It is also empathic. So you're looking at the emotion, the how they're feeling, connecting with the child about that. It's based around understanding and intentionally noticing what's going on for your child in that moment. It's mutually respectful. So the child should have respect for the parent as person, also as their position as a parent, but the parent should also be respectful of the child as an individual and as someone who is learning and developing and growing and experiencing all of these feelings that are valid at any age. Gentle parenting fosters connection between a parent and their child. It's continuously investing in that relationship and that connection between the two of them. And it's trusting. The child knows what to expect from the parent. It's very consistent. They also don't have a lot of fear of the parent because they trust that things aren't going to get out of hand. They trust that the adults in their lives are going to be consistent, trustworthy adults. And the flip side of that is that parents who practice gentle parenting appropriately trust their child. They give their child independence in situations. They trust them to make good decisions, to be able to apply these kind of general rules that they, kind of have for their lives to new things. When my daughter was 2, we had read to her a Berenstain Bears book where then it's about bad habits and the family comes up with this list of rules, right, of what you do and a consequence for it. So a little bit after that, she said, Mom, we need more rules. And I was like, what 2-year-old wants more rules in their life, right? That's not a normal reaction. And I told her that I said, we do have rules. What are you talking about that we need more? I said, our rules are that we're considerate of other people, that we take care of our house, we take care of the planet, that we're kind, all of these things. And she said, no, 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 not like that. Like, do this, don't do that, always do this. And so she was 2 at the time. So it was a basic conversation. But I said, well, what does that teach you? Why do you think that would help? And then she kind of thought about it for a little bit. And then she said, yeah, actually, we don't need those. And which is true, right? Because if you run yourself into this trying to anticipate every possible thing and have this specific consequence that you have to, pay or deal with after that, you start memorizing these specific things. And gentle parenting is focused on teaching these concepts and these skills that are going to make the child more adaptable and more resilient throughout their life and ultimately the type of adult. So parenting styles ultimately and the types of parents that someone is or that they grew up with can typically fit into one of these 4 categories. So each of these is low or high responsiveness and then low or high demandingness. And so it's how much you expect of your child and then how much kind of warmth and responsiveness you have. So parents that are highly responsive and have very few demands on their kid are categorized as the permissive parents. So they're very child driven. What their child wants, they get. They don't have a lot of rules. If they do have one, they're not going to really enforce it. They don't want conflict. And so they tend to be overindulgent because their kid is just kind of running the show and their role as a parent is just to, tell them that they're wonderful and kind of support their dreams and whatever they want to do is great. Parent is one that also is really low on this scale of demandingness, but is also really low on their warmth and their responsiveness. So neglectful parents tend to be really uninvolved and absent. They don't really pay much attention or care a whole lot about what their child's doing. They don't give much guidance, but they also aren't telling their kid that they love them and they're important and all of that. And they're kind of indifferent to what their child does. The parent is usually preoccupied kind of with their own life, and the child isn't a huge factor in that parent's life. Top right, an authoritative parent is highly responsive and also has high expectations for their kid and would be high on this level of demandingness. So authoritative parents solve problems together with their child. They have very clear rules and expectations, and the ones that they set are very consistent. And there's open communication that is then based on natural consequences for problematic behavior. Gentle parenting fits into this category. It's part of these authoritative parents. So there are expectations, there are rules, if you want to put it that way. There are natural consequences if things go wrong, but it's also really warm and responsive to the kid. Authoritarian is the other one that is really high and demanding, but it is really low in that warmth and responsiveness. So an authoritarian parent, this is the because I said so type of parent. Typically, it's very parent driven. What they say goes, and you don't disrespect them. You don't talk back to them. You don't challenge them. They have really strict rules that usually have punishments that go with that. It's one-way communication. The parent is in power and control, and they are dictating to the child what they do. The child does not have a voice back. This isn't a negotiation. What the parent says goes. When you look at these, a lot of you probably see yourself in at least one of them. You might say there's some situations where I'm one and some where I'm the other. If you have more than one kid, you might feel like you're more of one type of parent with one or the other. And you also probably recognize your own parents in this or the caregivers that you had growing up and kind of what this looked like and how this feels to you. So a few myths as it pertains to gentle parenting. One is that gentle parents don't set or enforce any behavioral limits. This isn't true. As we saw, in the previous slide, there are high and consistent rules and expectations, but it's that warmth and responsiveness and nurturing that goes along with it is what makes that gentle parenting. Another common myth is that gentle parents want to be their child's friend rather than parenting them. This also isn't true. Gentle parents are very aware that the parenting role is different than a friend role that carries responsibilities with it. It's not that my child is my best buddy and, we just hang out. There is acknowledgement that there is a power difference in this. There's also a difference in an adult's level of development, cognition, problem solving, all of that in a child's at different ages. And the parent is still firmly the parent. Another myth is that gentle parents give their children total control and ignore their own needs and authority. Also, this isn't true. One of the things that I really appreciate about gentle parenting is that the parents' needs are acknowledged also. Parenting should be fulfilling for the parent, hopefully. All of us are going to feel like we're failing at different times, right? Or something didn't go the way we wanted, and we're frustrated and we're stressed, we're exhausted, all of those things. But ultimately, it should be something that feels worthwhile to us, that we feel like we're able to parent in a way that we're choosing to, and then we should feel good about those strategies that we do. Also, with this communication with kids is mutual respect. It means that a parent is completely valid in saying, you know what, I need a break right now, or this is too much for me. I'm going to take some space from you and come back and talk when I'm ready to. It isn't just on the kids' terms. It's also the parent being open about their emotions, about their needs, and about how they're going to problem solve and support their child. Another common myth is that gentle parenting is going to interfere with healthy development and progression towards adulthood. So people think that if you're a gentle parent, you're cuddling your child, they're never going to be self-sufficient. They aren't going to learn the skills that they need. They aren't going to be competent adults later on, which also is not true. We'll get to what some of the research says about that in a minute. So what actually happens based on the different parenting styles that I talked about 2 slides before kind of shows you what the general trends are for these different parenting styles. So we'll start at the top right, because this is a gentle parenting category. The authoritative parenting group, their kids tend to be self-assertive, independent, friendly, cooperative, motivated, and competent. They tend to trust themselves. They're able to navigate a lot of social situations, and they tend to be pretty high achieving because of their resilience and their confidence that they have built along the way. Moving to the left, authoritarian parenting, that's that really high level of demand without much warmth or nurturing, tends to result in kids who are withdrawn, apathetic, shy, especially within girls, hostile, more common in boys, unmotivated, and incompetent. A lot of these kids are so used to having someone dictate what they're supposed to do that they aren't confident thinking for themselves and problem solving and figuring it out. They don't feel confident to be able to do that. Moving down to the purple square, uninvolved parenting, which are the more kind of negligent ones with low demands and the responsiveness. Those kids tend to be unmotivated, self-effacing, indifferent, destructive, detached, and socially incompetent. Nobody has shown them that they're valued or communicated that to them. There haven't been a lot of expectations. And so they can kind of be a little bit lost and, just kind of wandering in that. And then the permissive parents that are really warm and nurturing, but have very low demands tend to have kids that are impulsive, dependent, undisciplined, immature, manipulative, or self-centered. They're used to there not being any limits on what they can do, but total support and encouragement for themselves and for their own interests. So gentle parenting day to day can look a lot of different ways, but some of kind of the general guidelines from this. The first one that's really important is that expectations are developmentally appropriate. You can't be a gentle parent when putting teen-like expectations on your toddler. They aren't able to do that. It isn't going to work. It's not a failure on your part. It's not a failure on their part. It's that isn't feasible for where they are. So a huge part of effective gentle parenting is being aware of child development. What is reasonable to ask of my child at different ages, and kind of checking ourselves, especially if your kid is kind of melting down or having a hard time with it, to kind of check in and think, okay, is this an appropriate expectation? Is this something reasonably that I should expect my child to do? Another principle is that children's behaviors are discussed with an emphasis on what they're feeling, the choice that they made as a result, and their impact on others. When my kids were younger, if we were going to the two big ones, if we were going to a restaurant or if we were going on an airplane, I would always set really clear expectations for my kids behaviorally. And a big part of that was the people sitting on the plane next to us or at the table next to us didn't choose to come to a nice meal or go on a plane with toddlers today. And I would tell them I made that choice. And so if you need attention, need to interrupt me, something like that, you can in this situation because I chose to come to the restaurant with you. I chose to take the plane trip with you, but it's not okay for you to interfere with the experience of people around us that didn't make that choice. And so if they were, getting loud or whatever it was, and I would ask them, what impact do you think you're having on the people next to us? Are you being considerate of the people sitting behind you? And that early on was a good way for them to start identifying what the choices they were making meant for kind of the broader community, the people that were around them. And that's a concept that we've definitely continued as they've gotten older and that they'll articulate, call each other out on, and that they communicate a strong awareness of. Gentle parents also often have fewer and more generalized rules, but those boundaries are really firm. So it's like my daughter saying we need more rules. And I said, we have rules, but they're about treating people with kindness. It's about being considerate. It's about taking care of our environment. That's usually more of what we see in gentle parenting are these guidelines that there's a lot that could fall under this, but it's not just this laundry list of do this, don't do that types of transactions. Another key part of this is parents sharing their own feelings and reactions, which I touched on a little bit before. Some of this is the positive, letting your kids know when you're having such a good time with them. I was in Gatlinburg with my kids this past weekend, and there were several moments with each of them that I was aware of it, just stop it, had to make sure to communicate to them. Like I told my son at one point, like, I am so glad that we are doing this hike together. I love going through waterfalls with you. I'm so glad that you saw that bear before I did and you showed it to us and we got to take pictures and see it. That was really special. Telling my daughter I had so much fun playing that game with you in the pool. I had never played that game before. Thanks for teaching it to me. That was a really good time. So a lot of times as parents, I think we kind of notice this, or we notice like, oh, this feels good. This is the fun part of parenting. But communicating that to your child and letting them know what a good time you're having with them. And a lot of times they'll connect that to the choices that they've made, their behavior in those moments. And with that connection from gentle parenting, they want more of that. They care about you as a person. They recognize that you have feelings too and genuinely want good things for you. When things aren't going well, it's also completely appropriate to say that you were disappointed, that you're frustrated, that you're angry. All of those feelings are valid. It's very appropriate to give a name to it, to let your kid know what that happened. And they can see that mom can get angry and I'm still always going to be safe with her. Mom can be sad and that's okay. And we're going to be okay on the other side of it. I've told my kids from the time they're really little, there are some things in the world that are really worth being sad about and that are really worth being furious about. And you're going to see me be mad about those things that are usually, big injustices and things like that. You're going to see me sad about things that matter so much that I am sad, when something goes wrong, if somebody I care about has something bad happen to them, all of those. So some ways this might sound kind of the day to day is saying, you know what, I was really disappointed that we had to leave the park early because you chose to throw sand instead of being considerate of the younger kids playing. It's really clear and open that this was the natural consequence of the choice you made and how you feel about that. I think a lot of times parents feel like we can't show any emotion because that's going to be weakness, but it's actually more effective for our kids to grow up seeing us experience emotions and handle those in healthy and appropriate ways. Rewards and consequences also are going to be natural consequences, natural rewards based on the child's needs and behaviors rather than external and disconnected. So if your child, to use the example before, is throwing sand, a natural consequence is that we leave the park. Your child throwing sand and therefore they don't get to go to a birthday party the next day that's in a totally different environment isn't as much of a natural consequence. Or your child throwing sand so they don't get dessert that night. That's not a natural consequence because it doesn't connect to the behavior. So what we're doing is trying to identify because you did this, then this is the natural extension of that, sometimes in really positive ways. So it might be you were doing such a great job at the park that let's stay an extra 15 minutes because we're both having fun and I trust you to make good choices. As children become older, they can also become part of determining appropriate and natural rewards and consequences. It's very appropriate to tell an older child and a young teen, if this happens, what do you think the consequence should be for that? And let them be part of problem solving. And then if it does happen, they make the irresponsible choice, then they helped determine what the consequence of that was going to be. And carry that out as a family, as a parent, as a dyad and as that partnership. Problematic behavior also is stopped and processed sorry, I should clarify this better. So problematic behavior needs to be stopped, right, quickly, especially if there's a danger to it, but it can be processed during a more emotionally receptive time for both the parent and the child. So when your kid is in the midst of just this meltdown and all of these really intense feelings are hitting at once and they just, kind of see red and are lashing out, throwing stuff, whatever it is, you need to, kind of remove them, get them safe. But you don't need to talk to them about what they did and what they should have done right then. They're not at a point that they can actually hear you, that it can actually matter, that you can process it. And so removing them at the time and then circling back later is going to be more effective. Also, parents, we're not always at the best state to have this meaningful, thoughtful, well-processed conversation with a child right when they did something that was infuriating or that was unsafe or whatever it is. And so also recognizing in ourselves when you're ready to talk or not. It is very common for an effective, gentle parent to tell their child, I'm really disappointed with how you handled that, and I'm not at a good place to talk about it right now. So I'm going to go sit in the backyard for 10 minutes and have a cup of coffee, and then we're going to talk about it. Setting those boundaries, letting your child know what to expect, all of that reinforces the problem solving and coping skills that we want them to develop. So a few strategies that you can practice if you want to be a gentle parent, if you are kind of incorporating this into your life, if you feel like you already are a gentle parent but want to get stronger, or if you're not so sure about this but maybe want to dabble. These are some things that you could consider. So the first is to intentionally notice and identify your child's emotional state before you engage. So, wow, it looks like you're really angry right now before you start talking about it. I'm seeing a lot of tears. It seems like you're feeling pretty sad. Can you help me understand where that's coming from? And start there before getting to the correction. Another strategy is to communicate a distinction between behaviors and your child. So rather than, it makes me crazy that you're such an aggressive person, talking about, I know what a good person you are. And when you act aggressively, that's really confusing and disappointing for me. So separate those two out so you can talk about the behavior without it being this more permanent sounding description of the child themselves. Another is to assess your expectations of your child to make sure they're developmentally appropriate. Custom out, especially if you keep asking your kid to do this certain thing and they're just not, maybe look at, okay, do I need to bring my expectation down a little bit? Am I asking for something that they are not yet capable of? Finding opportunities to ask your child for their input on decisions. This can be as basic as, what do you think we should have for dinner tonight? Which park should we go to today? If you're taking the dog for a walk, which direction do you think that we should turn? Just those little ways early on that give your child a voice where they see that what they say and what they want to do matters and that you're going to listen to it and respond is a good kind of entry point for developing this type of connection. And then articulating your own boundaries and saying it's not okay for you to shout at me. I want to listen to you, but I'm not going to stand here and let you talk to me like that. So I'm going to go to my chair in the living room or, kind of wherever it is. And when you feel ready to talk to me in calmer words, then I would love to have that conversation. You don't need to be the doormat. You don't need to let them bulldoze you. It is healthy to articulate, this is what I need and this is the boundary that I'm setting. And that's not moving because I have value as a person as well, and I need you to respect that. So a few adaptations for kind of more unique situations or ones that it might be a little bit harder. If you're the parent of a neurodivergent child, a lot of times this endless options and opportunities can actually be too much and overwhelming for them. So you can still practice gentle parenting and that choice, but bring it in a little bit where maybe you're giving 2 choices or 3 choices depending on their age and what they need rather than, kind of the sky's the limit and choose anything you want. And so bringing it into, do you want to go this or that way, or do you want to choose from these 3 different meal choices tonight? And things of that nature so that they have input, that their voice matters, that you are responding to it, but it isn't as overwhelmingly endless as some more open-ended opportunities might be. In dangerous situations, you're just getting your kid out of the way and you're going to process it later, right? So a car is coming, they are acting aggressively, whatever it is, you grab them, you get them safe, and then later on you figure it out. You don't need to stop to identify the emotion and give choice and all of that. If there's a danger to them, to you, to somebody else, to property, you do what you need to separate that, kind of remove the risk or the harm, and then when you're in a good state to process it, you can do that. When you and or your child are in a highly activated state, this was time to before, when one or both of you is just seeing red, when you're like, if I say words right now, they're gonna come out, really angry or loud or whatever it is, recognizing that and knowing that you can come back to it. The older your kids get, the longer that gap can be, and it still be appropriate. If my 2-year-old did something that bothered me at 8 o'clock in the morning and I don't talk about it with them until bedtime, I've missed my window, they've moved on with their day, that's totally different. If my now 13-year-old did something in the morning, getting ready for school that made me crazy, but we needed to get out the door and all of that, it is very appropriate to after he's home from school and I'm home from work and we've talked a little bit to say, so I'm really disappointed with how things happened this morning. Let's talk about it. What were you feeling? Why did you make that choice? What would be a better strategy for us to do tomorrow? Because I don't like leaving for me to go to work for the day and you to go to school being angry with you or frustrated with you. That doesn't feel good. So what are some changes that we can make to have more successful mornings? And another version of this is to allow yourself to be good enough at times. I used to teach parenting classes for parents that were divorcing and were changing custody agreements. And this was a principle there. Most of us really want to be a great parent. However you define that to be, we really want this to be the thing that we are great at in our lives. We want our kids to have a spectacular parent or more than one parent, all day, every day. And it can be hard when we feel like, wow, I really blew that. I didn't handle it well. I made my kid cry, whatever it is. We want the trend to be good. We want the trend to be nurturing and supportive and connected and all of that. But for a variety of reasons, there might be days or moments within days that being good enough is what we can do. And we kind of need to accept that. So maybe I didn't have the conversation with them that I wanted to, but I didn't do any further damage. And that just needs to be good enough for now. And maybe tomorrow I'm going to have like this great, conversation and insight into them. But from time to time, day to day, we need to accept kind of our own humanness. And you know what? I didn't make it worse. And that is good enough for now. So this is an example situation I'm going to read through, and I'd love for you guys to kind of put some ideas in the chat about this or how this would feel to you. So we're going to hold off on the last bullet point until we've talked about the others. So this initial part is I want you to imagine that it's your mom's birthday and your family needs to leave the house now so that you can pick up her birthday cake before the bakery closes and then bring that to the party. You have a 3-year-old that is refusing to put on their shoes. They're throwing them and shouting that they don't want to go to the party. So if you think about kind of how that feels, the frustrations you're having, all of those kind of swirling emotions from it, a few gentle parenting principles that you could potentially consider in this would be that opportunity to connect. So sitting down on the floor with them, making eye contact, using a calm voice so that they get the message, especially at 3, that you see them, that you understand that these are big emotions, and that you're making an effort to understand and connect. Next would be to validate and empathize. So saying something like, I see that you're frustrated that we need to leave the house. Sometimes I wish I could just stay home too. Right? It's true. It's valid. It also might not be what they were expecting. They might be expecting this like, no, get in the car right now. I told you we have to leave. But so pausing that to identify the feeling, relate to it with empathy, and letting them know that kind of you've had similar reactions to things you needed to do can shift that dynamic a little bit as well. The next is to show understanding or to try to understand the reason behind it. So asking something like, can you tell me if you're angry about your shoes or if it's going to the party? Because it can be hard to tell, especially with a younger kid. It just kind of all swirls. So try to identify what's the issue so that I can address that part and not get distracted by another possible stressor. Giving appropriate choices for the child's age. So for a 3-year-old saying, would you like to walk to the car barefoot and you can put your shoes on later? Or is there a different pair of shoes you want to wear? If the shoes are really the issue and it's just not a shoe day, then, give options about the shoes. You can still leave and do what you need to do without them having those shoes on their feet right at this moment. Setting clear boundaries. So letting them know we are going to leave now so that we can bring the cake to grandma's party. If you're too angry to talk to me, that's okay. And I'd love to talk to you when you feel ready. So if you've made this effort to connect, to understand, to give options, and there's kind of losing it, then the boundary might be, you know what, we're doing this because we're going to the party. We're responsible for the cake, right? This is a family member. This is somebody that we love. And so this is happening. And if you're mad, it's okay to be mad. We'll talk about it once you're calmer. So these are all things with a preschooler, right? That you would do, what this would look like, some different strategies. Not that you need to do all of these, but a few opportunities to practice gentle parenting in a situation like this. What I'd like you to think about and put in the chat is how would your response change if the child is 15 years old instead of 3? So if it's your teenager that won't get ready and won't get in the car to go to grandma's birthday party, what are some things that you might do or say or offer to navigate this with a teenager? Yeah, someone said let them stay home. That might be very appropriate. If your teen is independent and capable, okay, you made the choice not to come, right? Or it can, depending on where grandma's house is, well, I'm going to leave. If you decide to join us, you can ride your bike later, or you can, take your scooter or whatever it is. It's completely fine to do that, right? Because you are still setting that boundary. Let's say mom of 1 and 3-year-old. Yeah, but you will be eventually. But setting that boundary of, this is important and I'm a person, this is my mom and I want to celebrate her. So I'm doing this. If they're 3, you can't really say, okay, we'll just stay home then, right? Because you can't actually leave your 3-year-old home alone unless they have somebody with that. Yeah, help me understand what's keeping you from doing what I need you to do. Like, where's the barrier? Tell me what it is. What's the issue? And with an older kid and a teenager, a lot of times it doesn't even mean, was it this or this? You can just say, like, talk to me. What is going on right now? What's the real issue? There might be a compromise in there. It might be that, you're headed out at 5 o'clock and there's a game that they're really wanting to watch at 8 or something, and they're afraid they're going to miss it. There are things that you might be able to say, okay, well, let's do this for X amount of time and then do that. But you don't need to just, give into it, let them determine anything like that. And also with a 15-year-old, it would be really inappropriate to kind of tackle them and drag them to the car right there beyond that. And so figuring out, what is that line, what's appropriate and going through it. And that's where checking in about, is this developmentally appropriate? Are the choices that I'm giving appropriate would be. Hopefully the 15-year-old does want to go celebrate their grandma, right? That would be nice. That would be a good family decision. But if they don't, it doesn't mean that the whole thing gets scrapped. You can find some other options. All right. So then, whoop, sorry, my slide. There we go. So we know that gentle parenting is effective. A lot of the outcomes from this type of parenting are in line with those things that all of you were saying. This is, who I want my child to be. This is the kind of parent that I want to be. Some of the reasons for that, the first is that when adults respond with empathy, it's actually accelerating the cognitive development of a child's prefrontal cortex. So that prefrontal cortex is where we do the problem solving, the self-regulation. It's the last part of the brain to develop. That's why young adults aren't great at thinking through the long-term consequences of some of their choices. That's where that impulsivity comes from, all of that. And so the neuroscience behind it, you can actually boost that development and strengthen it from responding with empathy when you're interacting with your child. Also, we touched on this before, but gentle parenting develops generalized skills to navigate various challenges throughout life. You can't prepare your child for every single thing that they can possibly encounter. 10 years ago, none of us knew that AI and ChatGPT would be as big of a thing as it is now, right? We weren't thinking, let me talk my child through appropriately using that so that they aren't using it inappropriately and cheating on their junior high assignments or, kind of whatever it is. So you can't anticipate every situation that could face your child, but we can foster an ability to problem solve, to take other people into consideration, to set and maintain their own appropriate boundaries, to communicate emotion. All of those things generalize really well to a lot of different situations throughout life. Children who experience gentle parenting also have stronger social skills than those that are parented from other styles. They are comfortable expressing emotion. They have mutually respectful conversations. They set appropriate boundaries for themselves and for other people. And all of those are things that we want them to have entering adulthood. Gentle parenting also decreases power struggles, tantrums, etc. Those of you with younger kids, it is such an energy drain, physically, emotionally, everything else, when you are constantly battling over how many Teddy Grahams that they got, over putting your shoes on, over taking their water bottle. I mean, anything can become kind of the struggle. And it's not a good sort of lifestyle for you to have as a parent. It is to a degree inevitable, but decreasing that is also in your child's best interest too. You want them to spend the majority of their life being successful in things, getting to have experiences, having positive and healthy social interactions and interactions with adults, and being able to travel and go different places and be out of their routine a little bit and have that be okay. And so decreasing how much of our family life is spent in these power struggles and tantrums is a benefit for everybody. And then the last thing is that parents and children both report higher levels of satisfaction in their relationship with each other. Kids with gentle parents throughout each time that they're kind of checked in with, preschool, elementary, junior high, high school, and they've done surveys and interviews and other projects asking kids about parenting. Kids with gentle parents consistently report feeling safe at home, feeling loved at home, having clear expectations, a high level of trust and connection. And then when they're adults, they also report really positive childhood memories, experiences. They feel connected to their parents, later adults. So we know that it's good for kids at every age. But what I'm going to end with, I went back to also, is parents feeling positive about their relationship with their child and their parenting is also really important. there can be this kind of cultural idea that if you're a parent, you just sacrifice whatever it is for your kid and your needs don't matter anymore. You're there just to support them. And I want to challenge that because we know that a healthy, fulfilled parent is a better parent for kids. And often that means setting our own boundaries, expressing our own emotion, prioritizing things that matter to us, and feeling good about the different areas of our life. So if you find a parenting style that allows you to feel confident and allows room in your life for the other things that fulfill you and make you feel satisfied and positive, you're going to have a better relationship with your child. It's really hard to create a good relationship from two unhappy people at any age. And so if your happiness is at a reasonable level, maybe not, best day all the time, but overall you feel happy and content and good about your life, and your child is getting what they need to feel supportive and encouraged and able to progress in their life, that gives us the greatest likelihood of a really positive relationship. So that is the end of the presentation itself. I know there were some things popping up in chat, so we can go through those and see if there's questions, or if anybody wants to add questions now, then we have a little bit of time to talk about this still.